All right, well, welcome to Entrepreneurship Hour today. This week, I'm thrilled to share with you that we have Howdy Holmes with us. Howdy Holmes is the president of the Chelsea Milling Company, which is a family-owned business, been around for well over 100 years. They have some amazing business practices, which I think you're going to really enjoy hearing from Howdy here. One of which you may or may not know is that they don't do advertising. So they are the home of the Jiffy brand of mixes, which in the 1930s really started the revolution of these pre-made mixes. Before that point, there were not these pre-made mixes that we're all so familiar with now. But they don't do advertising, and they really rely on their iconic brand. However, for about 20 years, they made an exception on the advertising rule or their advertising practice, and that is because they sponsored Howdy when he was a professional race car driver. He was a professional driver, drove in the Indy 500 6 times, had a very, very successful career as a professional race car driver before coming to operate the Chelsea Milling Company. So with that, I'd like to introduce Howdy Holmes and welcome him here.
Thank you, Matt. So before I start, and thanks for coming out, I was asked to tell everybody that there's no credit for coming to this, and we're accepting donations of $5 a person on the way out. April Fools. Okay. Some rules, if you will, some rules of the road. If there are questions, please get my attention anytime. I have a tendency to go all over the map with things, and I would like it to be led by you. There'll be a more formal Q&A at the end, and Nick's going to let me know when there's 2 or 3 minutes to go, so we're going to reserve 15 minutes or so in a more formal session. But please, if there's a question from anyone, probably somebody else is thinking the same thing. And for me to get a temperature check from you, because I'm here to try and add value to you, I'd like to have a show of hands of people that would, since this is about entrepreneurship, you know, the American dream, how many people would like to start their own business? Okay? So I said to Nick when we walk in, be careful what you ask for, because it might come true. How many people think they know what business they would start, what that business would be in? So that's significantly less, but a passion for being your own boss. My first gem of the day is, it is a great, admirable thought to want to be an entrepreneur, to want to start your own business. It should involve some things other than, you know, self-satisfaction. You need to make sure that some of the things that you think about when you start a business, whatever it is that giving back to the community is part of it. And being able to be in a resource to stakeholders or employees and be a mentor to them, because you're going to be responsible for them as opposed to the employees working for you. You know, you want to take the attitude that any associates or any employees that you end up hiring in this quest, that you're going to work with them and not for them. Over the years, I've learned that words have different meanings, and at different times in their lives, they develop different meanings. And one of the things that I like to talk about in business particularly is the word that you'll be familiar with, the word empowerment, right? We hear that a lot. You know, we're going to empower others and all this. And if you're a student of business and you've read Stephen Covey and, you know, countless other guys, and empowerment is, in my opinion, misused. And it's misrepresentative. The empowerment means for. But if you're going to be a resource of people, you want to work with. So the right word is enablement. Enablement comes before empowerment. The difference between the two is if you work with someone, you have to know that person to be able to understand what he or she can or can't do. If you ascribe to, I'm going to empower a friend, or I'm going to empower an associate, or I'm going to empower an employee, usually in the sense of delegation. Delegation should mean I want to work with someone to help them grow. Well, how can you help someone grow if you don't know what their skills and their strengths and their weaknesses are? There's where the enablement part is significantly more important. Because when you pass something over to somebody and you don't know what their ability is, you've just scared the crap out of them, all right? Especially in a business setting where we have this hierarchical arrangement that's been 5,000 years, where somebody's in charge and everybody else is something less than that. And it's a kind of a scary environment, the business world, especially publicly held businesses. I've worked with a lot of publicly held businesses when I was a race car driver, and because racing is all about finding sponsorship and impressions, and so it takes an enormous amount of money to run a team. I never owned a team, but the owners that I drove for were responsible for finding corporate sponsorship. And nowadays we're talking about millions and millions of dollars. So your local grocery store, you may have an in with them, but if their budget's $300, you might get a cup of coffee and a donut maybe. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that corporate businesses and the sense of feeling and the sense of establishment as an employee is rigid. It's tough. It's may the best person survive. And you're used to that sort of competitive environment with what you're doing right now. The University of Michigan isn't exactly an easy place to get into. It doesn't have the reputation that it has because it's soft, right? And I don't know this for a fact, but I think that every one of you, or certainly the people that are here and the rest of the people at the university, this is a very competitive nature, and you will do anything you can to get a better grade, to get noticed, whatever the case may be. It's all about climbing the ladder, right? That's true in the corporate world. In a publicly held business, in private businesses, it's a little different. The view is for the long term, okay? And so decision making is significantly different. So if you want to start your own business, like a lot of people did, one of your first choices is, you start off private and then sell it. The tech world's a perfect example of getting some, find some funding, get something going, sell it, spin it for a good price, and so on. But I'd ask yourselves to be careful what you think you want to do, because in reality, you really haven't had much chance to try too many things, have you? You've been in school for how many years? With a goal in mind. And it's a noteworthy and a responsible goal. But if you haven't had the opportunity to work in business as internships and different types of businesses and so on, you really don't have any idea, what it's like. You have an impression what this particular industry may be, or this particular job may be, or you could, you meet somebody, or you hear of somebody, or you read about somebody, and they're a whatever, and that sounds, they make a lot of money, or they're very influential, or they're very important, and there's countless reasons that we are influenced, when we face the difficult task and say, what do we want to do in life? Who do we want to be? It's not an easy question to answer. So my quick story is I'm the eldest of 5. Born here in Ann Arbor, so I can say I'm a native. I can say that Ann Arbor is, Nick's heard this, 16 square miles surrounded by reality. Or Moscow by the Huron, or there are several other unflattering terms, but it's a great place due to the diversity and good hospitals and so on. It's just a wonderful place to raise children and so on. I just wish we were a little bit easier it was quicker to make decisions. Anyway, so as the eldest of 5 kids, we would go to the Indianapolis 500 every year. That was the only thing we did other than Christmas together. And my first race was in 1957. At the time I was 10. And has anybody been to the Indy 500 or seen it on TV? It's the biggest single-day sporting event in the world. I mean, there are 300,000 people there, so it's pretty impressive. And I guess I got the bug at the time, and I didn't realize what racing was all about. It just seemed like a thing to do. I never let go of that fact. And as I was old enough to drive, I would work summers at Chelsea Milling Company. I loved the family business, but like all of you want to kind of make your own mark. And they built Michigan International Speedway in the mid-'60s out here and offered a private driver school one year. And I went only because I, along with countless thousands other people, got a brochure advertising a driver school. And that kind of reawakened my interest in racing. And so I built a homemade trailer. I ordered a set of tools through a catalog for $69.95. The guys at Chelsea Milling Company built me a 12 by 20 foot plywood garage, and I bought a small single seat open wheeled racing car with the trust fund that had been set aside for me. I don't think for those purposes whatsoever, but that's what I used it for. And years later, I ended up with a really good career. I started an advertising business in motorsports, a marketing business in motorsports. I was the first ESPN color commentator for motorsports. What else? I wrote a book and was a journalist, wrote for the New York Times. The moral of the story is I did all these things, frankly, that I wasn't really qualified for. But how did I do that? And the really part of it is, and they asked me, well, what are you going to talk about? And I never really know. It just happens. And so, I mean, there's a message in here. So the idea is good entrepreneurs never run out of ideas. Okay, it just doesn't matter how impossible it sounds, how unrealistic it sounds. The more it separates you from the common path, the more intrigued I would suggest you be about it. And the more flack you're going to get about pursuing it. Because when we step outside the normal, acceptable ways of doing things, we get labeled. She's different, he's different. You can't do that. All of these kind of predictable expectations are set around normalcy. Okay, normalcy. What is that? Well, I guess it changes from person to person and from industry to industry. But the message about passion and the message about entrepreneurship is you don't ever run out of ideas. I mean, I don't know too many people that sort of were in racing. You know, racing has an image. It isn't exactly graduate school at the University of Michigan, or, racing's for goofy people. It's for risk takers. And I think on the surface, race car drivers or football players or baseball players or sports people aren't automatically thought of as being corporate icons or participants in corporate America. It's just a different sort of team. So I told you all these different things that I did. Well, how did I do that? And I guess I can't tell you what the answer is other than I learned it. How do you learn these things? Well, you just work at it. I mean, this sounds really simplistic, but because the structure that you're in now, it's easy to see, well, if I want to be a doctor, I've got to take these courses. I've got to do this. If I want to be a, I don't know, bamboo maker, well, then this is what I got to do. But the world of entrepreneurship, there aren't really rules. There aren't stepping stones. There aren't usually mentors that can be found. And sometimes that can be pretty darn challenging, or translation means that you have to figure it out yourself. And the more things that you can do that will give you a broader, a wider breadth of understanding of how the world works, whatever it may be, I would offer to you that your education, although it is directed towards a specific goal, to be a doctor, to get a master's in business, whatever the case may be, that's not what the benefit to you is. That's kind of the result. The benefit is the discipline and the dedication to get through that exercise. And it's by doing that that you experience a variety of different things. And, what do you learn from those things? A lot more than what you think. It isn't just this linear idea of my goal is to be to get a master's in business and then I'm going to make a boatload full of money and then have 14 kids and life's going to be great ever after. It doesn't work that way. So I did all these things, and honestly, I just was not qualified for them. I'm not a college graduate. I was at Eastern Michigan. I wanted to teach business. I've always been interested in business. But my senior year, I left and to pursue this racing career, order tools for $69, $95, and so on. I've told you that. I've been on the road less traveled. The benefit on the road less traveled is you've got to figure it out on your own. There aren't a lot of other people. In the process of figuring out, you learn a lot of things. You learn, in particular, that you're maybe not interested in what you thought you were. But that won't come until you try something different, okay? I would predict that everybody in this room is going to probably work in a field dissimilar to what you think you're going to do. Your generation of people be expected to have 14 career jobs. Okay, you're going to change jobs a lot. I mean, statistically, your group. I think that's, as an employer, do I want to hire folks that I think are going to stay 2 or 3 years and then move on? Don't want that. But I'm from a different generation. I'm one of these old farts, okay, that my generation would go to work and maybe they would work for somebody, for a company, or for 2 companies or maybe 3. That's just the way it is. But when we hire people at Chelsea Milling Company, and I have a responsibility, we have a responsibility of succession planning, whether it's my job or every other job out there, including hourly folks, well, you naturally end up dealing with people that are younger. And of course, we all judge people by our own standards and don't take the time to understand others, and therein lies the conflict. Therein lies the difference between empowerment and enablement, okay? So when and I didn't start racing until I was 23 years old. That is ancient. by racing driver terms, even when I started in the early 70s. Nowadays, there are drivers that are in Formula One or Indy cars that are in their late teens and have been driving for 8 or 10 years and so on. A couple of things. How are we doing time-wise? 10 minutes, okay. Has anybody asked a question yet? Or have I taken a breath yet, or am I just talking away? Yes. Those are difficult. Did everybody hear that? How do you get through those low moments when you're having difficulty and you're maybe uncertainty is on the menu for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? I guess the right answer is a lot of faith in yourself, a lot of perseverance in terms of never give up. These are like not meant to be canned answers. It's really true. I mean, the difference, I guess I'm here and you're there because I've done it and you haven't. And that's not a criticism, it's just a fact. So what's your first name? Zach. So when I tell you these things, it's because they're really true. I've got no reason to be any different. Those times will happen a lot. And I'm just thinking for a second that another good piece of advice when those happen is, besides the faith, the dedication, and the patience and the perseverance, try and turn a low time into a high time. So how do you do that? What are you talking about? I feel lousy. It's not working. I'm out of money. I just got fired. I can't find the resources. The I can't is everywhere. The question is, how do you deal with difficult times? And the answer is, to your best of your ability, flip it to be an opportunity. Because as soon as you take the emotion out of something, you start looking at it objectively. And that's a tough thing to do, because sometimes we feel comforted by feeling sad. Sometimes we feel comforted by being angry. I mean, we all have natural go-tos, right? We all have different families, and we all have different upbringings, and we all have different hot buttons and soft buttons and so on. So here's gem number whatever. If you had a choice, I want to see a show of hands here. If you had a choice, and we're business people, right? If you had a choice between being the smartest person in the room and the most personable, how many people want to be the smartest people in the room? I don't see a hand. How many people like to be the most personal? Bingo. Then you've already learned life's biggest lesson. Because as an employer and as an individual, I feel comfortable. I didn't always feel comfortable. I can go talk to anybody without being intimidated. And the reason I can do that is because I've done it. It maybe wasn't natural at first, but who do we learn from? We learn from other people. We learn mostly through observation. So the more interactions you have, and there are people in this room that really feel uncomfortable walking into a room of strangers and starting a conversation. Find a way to get past that. There are things that you can do about that. As an employer, whatever the business is, there are a lot of different disciplines. And I'm going to pick on MBAs for a second, okay? I insult everyone, all disciplines, men, women, whatever. So get that off the table. But my issue with MBAs is they think they've got the answer for everything, and it's analytics. Well, the problem with that is analytics are important, and having knowledge is important. But if you can't express that knowledge to the operations person, to the salesperson, to the HR person, to the rest of the people that you work with collectively to produce a product or a service or something, it's not going to work. If we don't collaborate, I know there's a lot of talk about teaming in business, outside of business. Honestly, I'll give you a little hint. Most of it's BS because it's the right thing to say. True collaboration, which takes place at Chelsea Milling Company. By the way, we give tours Monday through Friday if you're not doing anything. And true collaboration is very, very difficult. It means getting people of different interests, of different education, of different experiences to take themselves out of it and to consider themselves no different than, no better than, no less than others. Enablement. Others, here's the empowerment part. Other is the senior VP from operations. Enablement is, no, it's Bill, he's in operations, and he might have some interesting ideas. And there's a huge, huge, huge difference. One other thing that will be helpful in today's world with the internet and the emphasis on ourselves, since you guys are in the front row, and I appreciate you volunteering for this experiment, okay? Okay. So I just want to demonstrate something. So just pretend, I don't know whether you guys know each other or not. Pretend you don't. Pretend it's Thursday afternoon, you're in a grocery store, and it's packed. And you don't like standing in line, you can't wait because you've got something else to do. So you strike up a conversation, okay? So what I'd like you to do is turn to him, and there's a couple other things. You start the conversation, and then you respond. You talk about anything you want, okay? I'll give you a for instance. Like maybe you just introduce yourself, and then you respond. Here's the twist. You can't use first person. No I, no I've, no I'm. No my, okay? Right? Ready? Go ahead.
What you buying?
Flour, Jiffy.
All right, that's enough. Can we just... All right, so I could see them, and you couldn't. They were so far out of their element. Are you kidding me? Their hair hurt. They wanted to go like this, grab their head, because they had no idea what they were doing. Case in point, we don't have any idea what we're doing. We talk about ourselves all the time. I this, I, all the time, right? I mean, did your hair hurt? You're all right. I mean, you recovered. You won't die from this. But usually when I do that, just to try and prove a point, and I apologize again for picking on you guys. Otherwise, thanks for volunteering. Get over ourselves, all right? We put our pants on like everybody else. We're not a big deal. Okay, so I've been in the Indy 500 6 times, and so I'm Rookie of the Year and sat on the front row, and I'm a CEO of probably the most iconic brand in the United States, blah, 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 but I'm no big deal. Okay, I don't consider myself a big deal. You call Chelsea Milling Company and ask for me, I answer the phone. Right? I go out and try and invest in other people by telling them the way it is. Not the canned stuff about, hey, you can do this, and blah, blah, blah. Life is short. And the sooner you learn what's important, the sooner you're going to be able to apply it. And what that means is, and you've all got it, and that is, look, I want to be somebody that's popular because I'm consistent. popular because I've got integrity, popular because my values are important, popular because I mean something to myself and you mean something to me. And that's a hard way to be in our world, okay? Because most people fake it. I asked the question, what do people really think when they go home at night? What do they see in the mirror? Most of it's a fake. It takes a lot of courage to step outside that comfort zone and be truer to yourself. Because our job, sometimes our friends, the situation we're in, sort of demand something that we would consider to be a compromise. And I'm not saying that, there's anything wrong with that from time to time. I am saying, though, that if you play that game all the time, who in the world are you? And it's finding out who you are that's going to determine, not only how successful you are. Success isn't measured by dollars. Oh, I got the sign. Thanks, Nick. Success isn't measured by dollars. It isn't measured by position. It isn't measured by acknowledgement. It isn't measured by a lot of these things that we kind of worship and idolize. It's measured by integrity. It's measured by who you are. It's measured by things that really matter. And none of those things ever change. From the first generation, whenever that was, till the world gets obliterated, those things aren't gonna change. So as we wind down, as we mentioned in the beginning, this is your time. The time's for questions. So anything, any subject matter. Who's going to be the first one?
In your experience, is it more important to be passionate about what you're doing or the people you're working with?
I think you have to be true to yourself first, because if you're not, it's going to come off as being, between those two choices, yourself or the people you're working with, I would say yourself first, because that will be seen by others. If I have coworkers that appear to be really interested in others, but it's not genuine, okay? And we can all tell. I mean, we can tell, we love it when someone asks our opinion, right? We can also tell when someone asks our opinion and they don't really mean it, or they're just doing it to, stroke us. Does that help? Yeah. I mean, I think you'll find that if your standards, if your personal standards are such that you're true to yourself, then here's a better answer. It is not the golden rule anymore. That's fine. The golden rule, treat yourself like you'd like to be treated. I'm going to tell you that's pretty selfish. How about the platinum rule? Treat other people the way they want to be treated. Again, the difference, enablement, empowerment. You have to know the other person, because what pleases me might not please you. So the platinum rule is treat other people the way they want to be treated requires me to get to know you. That takes a little effort. And generally, we're in such a hurry, we don't take the time to do so. Good question. I'll tell you a joke why Matt's trying to find somebody else. Anybody want to know why the best race car drivers are short? First reason is there's a definite relationship between horsepower and weight. Second reason is when you're short, when you're small, they take up less space, so the designers can put more weight towards the center of gravity, which you happen to be sitting on. And the third reason is when you are short, it takes less time for the impulse to go from the brain to the foot. So, great question. And in 20 minutes, it's hard to cover that, but that's an important piece. it was me learning how to reinvent myself, because we're all products of whatever environment we're in. I was trying to gently say, you're in the academic environment, okay? There are a lot of other ones. So I went from the fast-paced world of race car driving on and off the track to the stoic, glacier-paced world, and that might be generous, of a 100-year-old family business. It couldn't have been more opposite. So when I first came back to Chelsea Milling Company, I appeared, number one, I was a race car driver, and you know, that's not exactly having a degree from Harvard. So you have to learn how to reinvent yourself to the new environment, and it was very difficult, very, very difficult. On top of that, my father was in charge. He had all the voting stock, and family businesses have any family businesses in here? Any family business members past the second, third generation? Only 26% survived to the second generation, 12 to the third. And the reason is because you don't make family decisions with your head, and you don't make business decisions with your heart. So for me, in this open, fast-paced world, I had to learn how to slow down, and because the environment, that's what's required. It was very, very difficult. And what I've learned over time is I try and reinvent myself as often as I can. Sometimes that's 2 or 3 times in a day. Now, how long does that last? That's not the point. The point is that you're willing to sort of take a chance, step outside that comfort zone, you know, rearrange the criteria by which you evaluate things, and test it. You know, this old theory that we created when we were 4 or 5, you know, to survive, is that still accurate? If you don't ever transition, then it's the stimuli is going to be new and different. You get left behind. That's a great question. So on that, I will say thank you for not sleeping, and have a great weekend. Make the best of your life. It's up to you. Thank you. God bless.
For coming out and supporting us.
Great job, guys. All right, I don't know anybody, I haven't seen anybody do a use of funds like this, right? This is fantastic.
That wasn't
work.
the challenge, though.
Right,
I'm sure. Let's clarify the challenge.
These guys are taking their business seriously, and I applaud you guys. These guys, this is not, I mean, this is their